Welcome into Shot and Vipp, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this football season by our friends at Johnny T-Shirt, who sponsor everything that Inside Carolina does over here. Co-hosting this, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and I'm joined by my fellow Carolina football letterman and teammate Jeff Schoettmer. Shot, everybody kind of thought Carolina would have that bounce back after losing to Virginia as a 24-point favorite. They go on the road to Atlanta, where they have struggled in the past. They get out to a hot start, but ultimately, it's the same team that we saw for most of the Virginia game. Carolina loses 46-42, a shootout at Georgia Tech to lose and drop their record to 6-2 now on the season. What were your initial thoughts watching this game?
As disappointed as I was watching the game last week, I didn't think I could I thought that was going to be the valley of our season, the thorn of our season, but it went from bad to worse. And, it just an all around awful performance in a moment where we could bounce back with our backs kind of against the wall and kind of flip the script, flip the narrative of our team and, rewrite the history going forward and kind of like, erase that memory from of the UVA game. But we got off to a hot start and just the wheels came off on the defensive end. And the thing that bothered me from the start was you could kind of see the culture of the team depicted on the opening kickoff. So since I've been playing competitive football, the kickoff team is always taught that when the kicker kicks the ball off, and it's usually 5 guys on each side of the kicker, if the kicker kicks a touchback, you set the tone and the intensity of the game in the opening kickoff by how fast your kickoff unit runs down. And if there is a touchback, the 10 guys that are supposed to make the play, they go finish through the end zone. And you turn on NFL tape, you turn on Georgia, you turn on Bama, you turn on any team in the country, any team that's worth a shit, and they're finishing through the end zone. And I just think something that small is kind of the depiction of our whole team and the culture of our program is we don't have attention to the detail on the little things. And, we didn't come out with our hair on fire. The first kickoff of the game is the first play of the game. Go make an impact. And our guys our coaches are allowing it to happen and our guys aren't doing it. So, that's something very, minute in the whole game, but that's kind of, that little detail is what kind of set the tone for me. And, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I mean, I don't want to harp on just that one little detail because we have a lot to talk about. But I think that's kind of the standard of our program.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying you shouldn't have to score 47 points to beat Georgia Tech, just with them being a couple years removed away from trying to move away from the triple option. And this is North Carolina's 3rd straight loss to them. And for me, I think Saturday, it kind of signified the end of the Mac Brown 2.0 tenure because it's the same mistakes. It's the same issues. Like you mentioned, I was embarrassed when they lost to Virginia, but as bad as it was, you could write it off. It's a 7-game season. It's an outlier, one bad game, a trap game, even as bad as a trap game loss as that could be, you could write it off. But they come out against Georgia Tech, and in that second half, especially that fourth quarter where the defense just went completely off the rails, everybody could sense what was happening. And the game essentially comes down to, hey, Drake May and the offense, can you please save us? And it's a defensive performance. They didn't deserve to win that game. Like if Drake May does go down the field and gives Carolina the lead back, one, there's nothing saying that the defense would have stopped Georgia Tech from scoring again. And two, if for some reason that they didn't have enough time to go the full length of the field when they're rushing for 10, 12 yards a carry, it was just a defensive performance where like you don't feel good about that win. And it's the same way they lost to Virginia, where they're putting Drake May in such a bad spot trying to win a game. It's a similar situation at App State. Every North Carolina loss, it's been similar tendencies. And I saw a stat. I have a bunch of stats, so be patient with me here on these stats. But uh, North Car- Georgia Tech's 6-year senior. I'll start with this one. Dante Smith came up with a career effort rushing for 178 yards, the most for a running back at the school since 2017. Smith came into the game with just 61 rushing yards on the entire season, including only 11 in the last 5 games. In one quarter, the second quarter, Georgia Tech was 14 of 14 in passing, 272 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaged 19.4 yards per attempt. In the fourth quarter, Georgia Tech runs the ball 22 times for 265 yards, averaging 11.2 yards per attempt. And then the final stat that I have is since 2020, all ACC teams besides Carolina are 53-10 as a double-digit favorite. Carolina has played 12 of those games. They're 6-6. It's like the games that Carolina should be winning, they don't. And it's getting to the point where you go on the message board, you go on Twitter. It feels like the fans are. This is just what they've come to expect now, and it does feel like there's a lot of apathy growing towards the program. So I don't think it's a situation where you fire Mac Brown. Like North Carolina is still 6-2. He's raised the standard for this team. I just think it's a situation where both sides most likely part at the end of the year and go their separate ways. That's if I had a bet on that right now. If you had a bet, is Mac Brown the head coach 2024 season opener?
I think this is his last season. Yeah, I mean, we still got a couple games, finish out the season. But if I were a betting man, I would say this would probably be his last season. The thing that when I was watching the game, I'm looking at UNC and kind of looking at them as like a fan's perspective. I'm like, here's how I look at it. Like, you go on a date with a girl. You see this girl on campus. She's the girl of your dreams, the most beautiful girl or guy you've ever seen, whatever if you're a male or female, whatever. And you take her on a date, and the date goes so well, you're like, I'm going to marry this girl. The next day, you see her in class, and she's got a boyfriend or a wedding ring on her finger, and she completely played you. That's how I feel about this being a Carolina fan. Is like, you get to these very extreme highs, like we're 6-0, we're top 10 in the country, we just beat Miami, and then we fall flat on our face for two straight games. And it's just like the highs and lows of this program are insane. And I kind of want to mirror, we'll talk about two mirrored situations in terms of in 2020 when UNC beats Miami, where Javonte and Mike run wild and we run for 500 to 600 yards, and we're top 10 in the country and about to go play A&M in the Orange Bowl. The peak of that season, you just felt like there was an upward trajectory of Carolina football. Like, we have a really legit quarterback. We have an NFL quarterback. We're recruiting really well. We have studs all around, and we're finally going to play in a big-time bowl game against an SEC opponent. And then, that season doesn't end up ultimately how we want it to. And then fast forward 2 years later, we kind of get to flip the script and kind of rewrite the narrative. 2022, we beat Miami. We're 6-0. We're top 10 in the country. The next 2 games, we fall flat on our face and completely flip the script, And it's just funny to me that in Mac's tenure, his second tenure, that those are very parallel, storylines and how we get kind of to the peak, not to the peak like national championship, but like we're approaching the peak, and we're borderline national program. We're trying to get out of the regional program, and then we just fall flat on our face. And Coach Brown, since he's been back, has been talking about changing the narrative from becoming a regional program to a national brand, and that's happened twice in his 5 years that he's been here. That we're approaching it, and we just fall flat on our face, and now we're going to be a regional product for the next couple of years, I believe.
Yeah, the issue with the staff and the team and the program as it is right now, they just have no answers when other teams identify what their weaknesses are. And I think that is a reflection of your leadership, where other teams figure out where Carolina is susceptible and they start leaning on them, and North Carolina has zero answers. They can't get off the field. The defense is a complete mess. Your interior defensive linemen are getting blown off the line on a consistent basis. Georgia Tech was rushing for, I don't have the exact number in front of me. They were rushing for essentially a first down every time they put the ball on the ground. Tempo, it's a North Carolina team that, as the season's gone on, the rotation of guys has kind of gotten shorter, and you'd expect more people to be playing as the year goes on and more people get comfortable, but it's kind of been the opposite for this North Carolina team. And the guys that are playing, that came in as these heralded recruits, they're getting pushed back so far on every play, and the announcers are making comments like, "Oh, North Carolina's defense is gassed." Yeah, I'd be gassed too if every play I was getting blown off the ball 7 yards and I was getting driven back. Like, the defense, when they started making those gas comments, that was midway through the fourth quarter, and I think Georgia Tech had the ball for like a minute in the entire third quarter, where it's not like their snap numbers are high. The player that had the most snaps on Carolina's defense was Kamon Rucker. I'm pretty sure Kamon Rucker is the only one who played over 60 snaps. I'll look to confirm that right now. Yeah, Power Echo, Cedric Gray, Kamon Rucker played in the high 70s, 80s. Cedric Gray had a pretty good game, I thought, where he's pretty consistent with what he's going to do. Kamon Rucker look pretty good in the snaps he's going to do. But that interior defensive line, those aren't the guys that are playing 70 plus snaps in this game. And North Carolina, the defense is so bad. And I think one of the other issues with this North Carolina team is that tempo. Teams start going tempo on them, and there's zero answers. What are you seeing when other teams are tempoing North Carolina? And where has the defense fallen off so far the past two games, where they're regressing back to that 2022 defense and even worse?
I kind of want to start with the first quarter, because the first quarter was as good of a start as I could have imagined for this Carolina team coming off that UVA loss. We'll get to the offense, but our defense, look, they have 2 4th and short stops in the first quarter. They're lining up, they're being physical, they're IDing formations, they're IDing personnel. They have a little pep in their step. And then all of a sudden the second quarter turns, and you're right, Georgia Tech turns up the tempo a little bit. And the first touchdown they score is on an unbalanced formation. So they put all the skill receivers on one side of the ball. So when that happens on defensive football, you have to adjust in a certain way. You either run the corner over or you roll the safety down and handle it that way. And there were some communication issues with our secondary in terms of how they were going to do that. On the first play that they scored, I forget who the corner was. It was either Marcus or Holloway. They're running over late to cover down on number 3 to the field, and they run a simple bubble screen. Nothing crazy. The scheme is literally, Georgia Tech's going to get the ball into their playmakers' hands in space very quickly and try to make a tackle, or try to break a tackle and gain some positive yards. We're late getting lined up, obviously, just one guy, but the other 2 guys that I want to point out are Geo Biggers and Stick Lane. I've been talking all year about pursuit to the ball, pursuit angles to the ball, our tackling ability in space, our effort, our intensity, our physicality. It completely flipped the switch. We stopped doing all of those things. And if I hope Jason Staples does a breakdown of this play later in the week, but it's like we loafed on the play from multiple positions, and we took terrible angles and didn't use our leverage. And there was just so many issues, and it was such a simple play. It was just a bubble screen to the 3 receiver. And it compounded the rest of the game in terms of, we never made any corrections whenever they would do an unbalanced formation or run tempo. Is we didn't have like one quick check we could make to get everyone on the same page. It just bothered us the rest of the game. And part of that is coaching. Is okay, we got an ID, they're running tempo, get the call in quick, or just tell them to have an automatic check whenever they're in this formation, run this coverage. It's very simple. The front knows what they're doing, the back end knows what they're doing, and it's usually like a base training camp call that they've run 1,000 times. And you do that just because, okay, you're trying to scare Georgia Tech out of the tempo. Okay, we know we can align down on whatever formation you have. We're going to be safe, sound, line up and go play football. And we never did it. And the frustrating thing to me about us, we see tempo all the time. We see it from our offense in practice. We practice it. You know, we've been playing tempo teams for, you know, the last 5 years now. So I don't know why we can't handle tempo, but it's just it's frustrating on both ends. It's the players and the coaches. I mean, everyone's at blame for this.
Yeah, the issue with the players and them loafing and not being in the right spot, and a lot of that, I'm falling it back on the coaches because again, this isn't a one-off thing with them, and it doesn't feel like there's accountability. And when we talk about same issues keep popping up against these lesser teams, and the same mistakes keep popping up against these lesser teams, Georgia Tech blocked a punt, 3 block punts in one season. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a team get their punt blocked 3 times in one season, and this is becoming a weekly thing with this North Carolina team, where you're essentially better off keeping Drake May out on the field for 4th downs than sending out your punt unit. What are you seeing from Carolina's punt team, and how do teams keep getting through, and how aren't the coaches correcting what's happening? Because it seems like they're giving them the same look essentially. Other teams are identifying where Carolina's weakness is on these punts, and teams are continually getting a hand on punts.
Yeah, and you kind of listen to Mac's press conference after the game, and he says, you know, our special teams played pretty well other than the block punt. And I mean, we miss a clutch field goal at the end. We get a punt blocked, and he's like, well, it didn't hurt us that, you know, our defense got an interception right after. Well, I think that's our issue is we're like, the interception had nothing to do with the punt block. We got a punt blocked, and it could have been way worse than it was. So, like, let's address the issue head on that we got a punt blocked, and not compliment the defense for getting an interception there. And actually our punter punted it pretty well when he got a foot on it. But you know, I think there's a stat if you get a punt blocked, you're going to lose the game 80% of the time. You know that stat? I mean, that's like,
I think it's from Butch Davis. I feel like I heard Butch Davis.
It's training camp 101. It's like the first thing that they say on the first day of practice. It's like, if we block a punt in a game, we're going to win the game 80% of the time. So, that stat held true for Georgia Tech. But it's just that's a microcosm of our whole team. It's like I mentioned in the opening monologue of our kickoff unit not running through the end zone on the opening kickoff. Well, us getting multiple punts blocked and not making changes throughout the season, like, you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. You know, I said that earlier, and we're not coaching it. It's happened multiple times throughout the year, and we're just allowing it to happen, and we're not making changes. So we don't deserve to, you know, have our name in the top 25 or you know, play for an ACC championship.
Yeah, same issues, same mistakes, little to no accountability. I have another stat here from Sherelle McMillan from Inside Carolina. In UNC's last 6 losses dating back to 2022, it's held a 10-point lead, at least a 10-point lead in the second half in 4 of those 6 losses. And it's not, you know, we're not playing Alabama, we're not playing Georgia, we're not playing teams with these high power offenses outside of Oregon in those 4 losses that Carolina had a double-digit lead. It's Georgia Tech twice, UVA last week, and then Oregon was the 4th team. What do you think it says about a team that they get up, they get comfortable, and they might think the game's over, and they allow that window for a team to get back in a game pretty easily?
I think if you see a pattern in this happening multiple times, I think I guess you got to question the culture of the program. And culture is a very widely used term that a lot of people just say, well, it's the culture of the program. That's why they're losing or winning. And maybe it is the culture in this sense that we have teams on the ropes a bunch. We have our foot on their neck and we don't finish them off. Like that's got to come from the top in terms of when we're up 10 in the second half against an inferior opponent, we have to deliver a kill shot every time. And I think it starts from the top, then it goes to the coordinators, and obviously the senior and junior leadership, the best players on the team, they have a hand in that as well. So everyone's at blame. And the reason I thought this team was different, like we spoke about last week, was our best players are our leaders, and they have played a lot of football. And I think maybe they haven't figured out how to win when they're up, because those are the same guys that has been happening to, the past couple of years. So I'm kind of at a loss for words because, watching that first quarter, the way we came out with the energy, the effort, the tempo, the physicality, the sense of urgency, the body language. And I'm like, where did it all go? It was a tale of quarters. Like you look at our defense, we give up 0 in the first quarter, 0 in the third quarter, and we give up 46 combined in the other two. It's like, what are we missing? Because how can you, it's just like, is it the ability to focus? Is it attention to detail? Like what is the driving factor in this that we can look so good at times, and then we go through a 12-minute stretch where we look like we're the worst group of 5 football team in the whole country. Not even Power 5. Like we look like we're the worst group of 5 team. And it's just like, I don't know. I wish I could put a finger on it.
What did the live line get up to?
So I looked at the end of the first quarter when we're up 14-0. So the opening line was 11 or 12, depending on where you looked at it. It got up to 26.5. And everyone knows that Vegas is always right. Like you look at games across the board and it always comes down to the exact spread that Vegas picks. Vegas had us 27-point favorites after the end of the first quarter because they were watching that game. They knew we were going to run away with it. I tweeted out, I was like, we should win by 21 after watching the first couple drives, and it would be a disappointment if we don't. So I kind of regret that. Maybe I was the jinx on the game. First of all, I don't believe in jinxes. I believe in.
I was gonna say your tweet from Dallas, Texas had no impact on what was happening at Bobby Dodd Stadium.
No impact. You know what has impact on the game on Saturday, or the second, third, fourth quarter is winter conditioning. It's spring practice. It's summer practice. It's fall camp. It's the week of practice leading up to it. It's everything. And I think that's our deep-rooted issue. There's something we're missing in that period, whether it's from January to August or from Monday through Friday of game week. That's the deep-rooted issue is where we're missing the mark.
We're gonna get right back to it, but first I have to remind everybody about Johnny T-Shirt. If you're making it to the Campbell game, head on over to Johnny T-Shirt on Franklin Street. If you're not going to be in Chapel Hill, you could visit Johnny T-Shirt at johnnytshirt.com. Stock up on all your Carolina gear. They are always running great sales there. And as we get closer to the holidays, as we get closer to basketball season, you are going to want as much Carolina gear as possible. They are great people, great customer service. And don't forget, Inside Carolina Premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. Sean, I want to talk about the end game sequence where North Carolina is down to resorting to hoping to stop Georgia Tech with 2:54 left on the clock, under 3 minutes in the game. And what you saw from the Carolina defense, because with the way Georgia Tech was running the ball, I don't think anybody who likes Carolina and wanted Carolina to win had any sort of faith that Carolina would get a stop. And of course they don't get a stop.
It's just the deep-rooted issues we have in our program. Everyone in this stadium that was at the game knew Georgia Tech was running the ball. every player, every coach, every fan, every band member, every person watching the game on TV, every person on the game following the game on Twitter, they knew that Georgia Tech was running the ball. Georgia Tech in the last 2 minutes of the game ran the ball 6 times for 25 yards and then took a knee to lose 2 yards and win the game. The fact that Georgia Tech knows that they're going to run their top 2 or 3 runs that they've been running the whole game. They're not going to do anything different than they haven't done earlier in the game. And we can't stop anything. We have no knockback from our defensive line. We're getting pushed around when we know that if we get a stop, we're giving the ball back to the best quarterback in the country with a chance to win the game. But we can't stop them. And there's no creativity from the defensive side of the ball in terms of like, all right, let me dial up this blitz to create a TFL. No, it was base defense, and they're going to hand the ball off, and they're going to get 4 yards. It's just like, gamble, do something. You know they're not going to pass the ball. Let me get a corner blitz and a nickel blitz and slant the line and have a spy player for when the quarterback pulls it. Like, don't just line up in your base defense and just let them knock you back and run the ball 6 times for 25 yards. It's that to me is like the epitome of our program right now. It's just like we got pushed around when everyone knew they were running the ball. And I guess that's the quote unquote culture problem we have.
Yeah, it felt like under 3 minutes left. It felt like a white flag, basically, what the defense was doing. It was a defense that knew that whatever Georgia Tech wanted to do, Georgia Tech was going to be able to do. Nothing from the coaching staff. You're in, your nickel personnel, which is usually used to, defend passes. When like you mentioned, I don't think you could have offered Georgia Tech's head coach a 3-time raise, and he was not going to throw that ball.
He's a former offensive lineman. He's going to run the ball in that situation. Those offensive linemen are the biggest hardos in the world in terms of they're like, we're going to establish dominance and we're going to run the ball. Like, that's exactly what they were doing. We had 3 timeouts. Like, we can't stop them 3 times under 10 yards. Because if it's 4th and 1, they're probably going to punt the ball because we're on, they were backed up. It's just like, yeah, we bent the knee.
Yeah. And I also, one thing I feel like we learned from our playing days is that just because you have a bad result or a bad game, there were bright spots in this game. Omar Hampton, I thought, was a huge bright spot for this North Carolina team. 29 carries, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's 77 yards away from 1K through Carolina's first 8 games. I think he's the best running back in the ACC at this point. And that's even with him playing in a limited role against that South Carolina team. What he's been able to do this season has been tremendous. And there was a part of the pain from the Virginia loss was like, you have Omar Hampton. Use him. If he's the best running back in the ACC, there's no reason why he shouldn't touch the ball the last 8 minutes. It felt like North Carolina tried to correct that. Georgia Tech just did a better job on those last drives of slowing him down and forcing Carolina to beat them elsewhere. And that kind of goes back to the other point where, once the other team makes adjustments, which they're going to make adjustments, it feels like Carolina runs out of answers a lot quicker than other teams do. But what did you like from Omar Hampton?
He's a beast, man. I mean, he is the best running back in the ACC. And he's solidified himself and set himself up for being one of the top, running back prospects in the 2025 draft. I know some draft scouts are watching, Drake May because his tape's getting analyzed every day, and they're seeing this 6-foot, Greek god running the ball. He's built from head to toe. He's got muscles everywhere, and he shows it on the field. He runs like he looks. The 2 of his touchdown runs were, unbelievable of how he's breaking tackles and his contact balance and just his physicality and the way he finishes runs. We're lucky to have him, and I wish we could, use him even more. Because, you know, after the first game versus South Carolina, you see British Brooks go run wild, and we're like, damn, he's going to be the guy. And then, you know, a minor ankle injury to him opens up the door for Hampton. And he's lived up to his recruiting status. And, you know, people talk about us wasting Drake and Sam, but, you know, Hampton he's a beast, man.
Yeah, it comes down to you're wasting everything on the offensive side of the ball. That's why we really haven't talked about the offense at all from this game, because again, you shouldn't have to score 47 points to beat a team like Georgia Tech. You really shouldn't have to score 47 points to beat anybody. It's shades of this USC team that we're watching, where every game turns into a shootout, and you're trusting your quarterback to get either you're trusting your team to get the ball last, or your quarterback to make one more play than the other team makes. Yeah, it's I think Omar Hampton's the best running back in the ACC. Other positives from that game, I think Drake May is the best quarterback in the country. I think you have a top 3 wide receiver in Tez Walker. So prayers up to Tez Walker, who took a brutal shot yesterday or on Saturday. I think you have a top 3 receiver in Tez Walker. Florida State, those guys would give him a run for their money. But, you know, I know Carolina has a lot of confidence in their guys. Bryson Nesbitt, I don't think Carolina could use him enough in this offense with how big a mismatch he is. You do have great skill players on the offensive side of the ball. Drake May, Tez Walker, Bryson Nesbitt, and it does feel like those guys are going to waste when you pair them with a defense that's now trending back towards the 100s.
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, if you grade the offensive performance yesterday, I think there's 2 drives out of, I don't know if they had 11 or 12 total, that you would essentially want back. I think the first one is the end of the third quarter, where, you know, I think we're up 10 at this point, and we have the ball, and we get to 3rd and 3, and we kind of give what I thought was an inside handoff that Hampton just bounced out wide because there was some interior pressure. But, you know, we got to find a way to, I think that was probably one call that Chip Lindsey wants back. And then obviously the Tez fumble in the fourth quarter, which was a great play by the Georgia Tech defense. So judging our offense, I mean, I give it an A-. You know, you score 40-something points, and you run the ball like we did, and Drake throw the ball like he did. And, you know, it's frustrating for them, but they can't get back in the locker room and start pointing fingers, because then this whole season would spiral out of control. You know, I know Drake's never going to be one of those guys. I don't think any of our guys are really going to go point fingers in the locker room or in the media, you know, blame coaches or blame the, you know, other side of the ball. But, you know, they held their end of the bargain, but ultimately football is a team game, and you need all 3 phases. And we wasted hell of an offense performance, you know, from our defense and special teams.
Yeah, Carolina is getting great performances from their offense and getting beat pretty badly on the other 2 phases. But that'll take us to our pick of the weekend, presented by our friends at Congruity. Congruity is a North Carolina-based national coverage, local presence, personal support type of company, straight from the Tar Heel State. They are empowering small and mid-sized business owners with HR and payroll outsourcing, enabling you to grow your business while they take care of your greatest assets, your people. And they are doing it with top-of-the-line technology and services for every stage of your business's growth with a state-of-the-art online platform. Congruity is obsessed with customer service. They become part of your team. They do the heavy lifting, providing essential admin support with a single point of contact and support available on demand, with services that are tailor-made for you, and they are transforming organizations. Congruity has helped hundreds of businesses improve and enhance their day-to-day lives. Level up your HR capabilities, save money, unlock game-changing growth. Visit congruityhr.com/Tar Heels to learn more about Congruity. Fill out a quick form to be connected to their consultants, and they'll give Inside Carolina listeners and viewers a payroll and HR assessment for free. That's congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. All right, Shot. We're trying to give the people winners. Last week, I went with the midweek game -3 Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech absolutely smokes Syracuse, Lane
It's a good
Stadium,
pick.
Enter Sandman. It was rocking. I was counting that money by the second quarter after I gave out that pick. You took Florida. I was actually at that game. You took Florida plus 14.5. It was not close. Georgia kind of, especially Florida scored the first touchdown in that game.
They were up 7 to
And it
nothing.
had the sense there where it was like, maybe Florida could do this. And Georgia just took them out behind the woodshed and absolutely suffocated them. You moved to 2-2 with your picks. I'm 3-1. What is your bet for this week?
My lock of the week is Notre Dame -3. I watched a little bit of that Clemson NC State game, and Clemson is not good. Their offense is a mess right now. Quarterback's not making good decisions, and I'll ride with a 6-year senior in Hartman, and the combo of Hartman and Marcus Freeman together. I like them even in Death Valley, so I'm taking Notre Dame -3.
It's a noon game too, which I think helps out at Death Valley.
Yeah.
You don't want to play Death Valley at night, but a
Mm-hmm.
noon game with them being 4-3 now,
Mm-hmm.
in a pretty bad slide. So
Clemson, I think they're 4-4.
Are they 4-4? Oh, yep, 4-4.
4-4.
10th in the ACC. This would be a third straight loss, dropping them to 4-5. Ooh. That's not a good stretch of football for Clemson. But Schott going with Notre Dame -3. I am going to go a bounce back spot here. I'm going to Bedlam. I'm taking Oklahoma -6. Oklahoma coming off the road loss at Kansas, their first loss of the season. I think they know they need to win this game in a pretty convincing fashion to put themselves back in favor with not only the playoff committee, but more importantly, in the Big 12 standings and trying to get back to the Big 12 title game to have that rematch with Texas. Oklahoma State has won 4 straight. I don't really think they're that good of a team. I remember watching Oklahoma State earlier in the season, and they lost to South Alabama. I remember they got handed by South Alabama 33-7. They've rattled off 4 straight wins: Kansas State, Kansas, West Virginia, and Cincinnati. But I'll take my chances with Brent Venables, an improved defense, and a quarterback like Dylan Gabriel. Oklahoma -6 is my pick. Carolina, it's not the most exciting game to try to get back in good standings. It's a noon kickoff on ACC Network, hosting the Campbell Camels. The Camels, what a interesting mascot. I'm calling it now, Schott. Next Monday, we will be talking about a victory.
Guaranteed. And if we don't, I quit. I'm turning in my resignation papers because I would not want to do a podcast after 3 straight losses, and that would probably go down as the worst loss in NCAA history. So
I don't know if you saw Chris Mad Dog Russo with the Phillies Diamondback series.
Yep.
When the Phillies were up 3-2, he said he would retire if the Diamondbacks came back and won the series. Diamondbacks come back. Chris Mad Dog Russo, no surprise to anybody, doesn't retire. I'm willing to put my IC career on the line and my IC paycheck on the line. I will retire from Inside Carolina if Campbell wins. But Schott, man, appreciate the time as always, and appreciate everybody watching and listening.
I'll retire if we don't win by 30 plus. How about that? I'm willing to say that. So have a good week, Tar Heel fans. We'll see you next Monday.